Alrighty, we're on the home stretch here, and one of the key things everybody always asks for is they want to hear more from the farmers. So we're going to finish off here with the farmer panel. We've got Keith that just spoke here. I'm going to ask him to put his farmer hat on, and then Joe Rowe and Dan Schultz, that was our guest speaker yesterday. I asked him to put his farmer hat on, and then Helle, our new board member. So I guess my first question is, would each of you take a little bit of time to introduce yourselves and tell us about your farm?
Well, I'll start since I'm next to you, Loran. So again, Keith Berns with Green Cover. My brother and I farm about 1,800 acres in south central Nebraska. We're about 50% irrigated, 50% dry land. We get about 25 inches of precipitation a year. In our area, the typical rotation is corn and soybeans, but since we've started down the path to soil health, we're trying to incorporate more diversity. So we are growing things like cereal rye and oats and barley, sunflower, buckwheat, things like that. We don't, people often ask, do you grow all the seed that you sell? And it's like, no, that would be impossible. And our environment isn't set up, we buy much of it from Oregon. But we do grow what we can, and so we're trying to diversify. We used to have livestock, but as we were growing the seed business, it was sucking all the labor out of the operation up into the seed business. We were doing livestock very poorly, so we got out of it. We decided it was better to not do it than to do it poorly. At some point, we'd love to get back into that if we could.
Joe Rowe, live over by Plymouth, Manly area, but farm by New Haven and Orchard. Just cover about 400 acres. Also grain merchandiser, buying grain for an ethanol facility by day. Corn, and then we'll mix it with some cover crops and strip till. Have tried beans, I'm allergic to them. So we're gonna try oats going forward anyway, as a rotation.
My name is Dan Schultz, and by day I'm a marketer, and so I help companies think differently about the way that they go to market. But during the other part of the day, I farm with my family, and we're building up a little homestead and a farmstead that we have in Northfield, and we grow some of our own grain. We've got a couple cows, so we're doing dairy, and then we've got chickens and laying hens as well. So that's what we do.
Good afternoon. I'm Helle Ruddenklau from Oregon. My husband and I farm in the Willamette Valley. We're about 40 miles from the Pacific Ocean. We get about 40 inches of rainfall, sometimes more, and which is too much, but that's one of the things we live with. We farm about 1,200 acres, just my husband and I, no added help. We do rely on some crews to come in once in a while to help us. We have a mixture of crops. Our biggest crop is grass seed for turf seed production. We don't do the turf, but we harvest the seed, and perennial ryegrass and tall fescue. And then we rotate those with peas and radish that go to Japan for sprouts. We grow some spring wheat. This is a soft white area, but we grow some hard red spring wheat for local market, developed through Ag Launch's partner in Oregon, Setco, for that local market development. And then we grow vegetables, sweet corn and green beans, and we have hazelnuts. Switch to try to do as much no-till as possible. Probably around year 2000, we were having some issues with resistant weeds we couldn't control in the system we had, so we had to do something different. And so the no-till really helped us out in that.
Alrighty, thank you for the introductions, and I want to make sure everybody feels welcome to ask us some questions as you feel comfortable. I'm not going to jump off the stage this year, so you're safe, but I do have canned questions just in case. But with the diverse panel we have here today, I wanted to make sure one of the key questions, I sat in the audience all day and I see the vision statement there. What is your vision for the future of agriculture? This is going to be my first panel. Start with Keith again.
Maybe I shouldn't have sat here.
We'd have got to you eventually.
Okay. My future of agriculture would be one that is profitable for everybody. And that's easy to say, but it's going to be difficult to achieve. So I think as I narrow it down a little bit more, and again, I'm not necessarily thinking of all of agriculture, but I see a future where agriculture gets back to growing more food and less commodities. And I would love to see this. I would love our operation to do this. And we don't do that. And I think it affects how we farm because we're not eating what we grow. And nobody else is eating what we grow either, except, cows. And so I think that I would love to see a future of agriculture where through a lot of the technologies that we're talking about here and others that will be developed, it will become easier for us to grow, process, and market food directly to the consumer. And maybe we don't do that on all the acres, but on some of the acres. So that's one of the hopes that I have, not only for our own operation, but for agriculture in general.
I think my vision for the future starts with the vision of the past. And that past was growing up on a small sharecrop farm and Dad saying, don't get involved in farming. Go to college, get a degree, go be a doctor. Go do something, don't come back and farm. Well, oops, here I am. And I want my vision, my message to be for my 3 boys that there is a future in agriculture. It's a bright future. And through companies like we have out here that we've invested in and making those investments physically, our investment in my children's future here in rural Iowa to live a vibrant life and raise a family.
I don't know how to follow that exactly. I just want to stand up and say, yes, that's exactly right. I think it's the future of agriculture is, I think, localized. We've been talking a lot about that. It's localized to where we're growing our own food. We're growing the things on our farm. We're actually consuming them. That's a lot of what our family farm is right now. We're trying to develop that. We're trying to consume the things that we grow and not just grow for growth's sake. I think that's hurt the industry a lot over the years. Cicero said that the man who doesn't know anything that happened before he was born never ceases to be a child. And I think that in a lot of cases we forget what happened before and what agriculture used to look like and what it could be again. So I think we're similar to what these 2 guys have said. We're coming back to what does agriculture need to look like at the local level and at the individual family level.
So I know one of the things I don't want. In Oregon, we're seeing more and more farms getting sold to institutional investors. And they are going in, for example, for the hazelnut industry, which we're also in, and they're just buying up the farms, tiling them, putting them into trees, and it's just an investment, and then they have a manager on the farm. That is a very sad future. And so need to get away from that if we can. And so how do we do that? How do we create opportunities in the local, at the local level for young farmers to come back to the farm and be economic? I mean, it has to be economical. I don't want just part-time farmers on the farm. I want people to be able to raise their family on it and make a living from it. That's what my husband and I have been really fortunate to do, and that's what I want for other people. And the other thing was I've changed my mind a little bit in the last few years. I used to be very much focused on you produce the crop that grows the best in a certain area and then you ship it, that it makes sense to where you can maximize a certain crop in that area, that's what you grow. But with COVID and supply chain disruptions and stuff, I'm like, okay, that doesn't quite work out. So we do need local supplies of food in the local region. So we do need to build up those local community systems and have that sustainable within the area. So there's definitely some things that I want to see and not want to see. So that's where I'm working towards.
Thank you for Helle, and I'll stay with you for this next question. We'll start back with you. A lot of what we do here at Ag Venture Alliance and Ag Launch Connection is work directly with the farmers through our farmer-centric model. What I want to ask you is how can founders ensure that their solutions are truly farmer-centric and help address the real pain points caused by farmers?
That is where this model just shines, I think, because getting founders out early. And so they can have farmers trial their products and what their ideas are and put that up against what's the reality on the farm. That is something that pretty quickly will show whether an idea really has merit on the farm level or not. So I can't think of a better way than what you guys have come up with between here and Ag Launch to have that work.
Dan, are you comfortable jumping on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that ultimately the Steve Blank has a quote that we in the startup world reiterate a lot of times, which is get out of the building, get out of the building and get to where your customers are, where people are farming. And so a lot of times we say things like, go get your boots muddy and get it out into the field with your farmers. And I think that's true. I think the thing that we need even more so is to live with your customers, like live their lives, experience that, and immerse yourself in the culture, because there is a challenge that exists in agriculture today where there's two diametrically opposed worldviews, or tends to be, between the founders and the people who are actually doing the farming. And so as much as you can do as a founder to immerse yourself in your customer's life and immerse yourself in their world and understand their worldview, even if you're not going to be a farmer yourself, understanding their worldview and where they're coming from, I think that's critical.
Bill, same question.
So I love analogies. Quick poll. Who here was a member of a vocational agriculture program in high school or FFA? Okay, good portion. And my belief in that, because my school didn't have one and helped get one started, so my sons had that opportunity, but my belief was vocational agriculture, FFA, was where basically what was theoretical knowledge being taught in the math, English, and science classes met reality. And it's where it finally connected those dots together and made it practical. We need the math to do our sheets to know if we made any money. We need the English to write our reports. We need the science to understand how these plants grow. And to me, that analogy is that vocational agriculture FFA program is what Ag Ventures and Ag Launch are doing in connecting the founders with the ideas to the practical on-farm, how can we make this work? And that is that connection for me.
Yeah, like I said in my talk, you need to go to where your customers are. You need to, very much like what Dan said, live their lives, understand their pain points, get very comfortable with them, and then get some of them on your team. Whether you hire them as an employee, you have some sort of an advisory panel. You need to have their input because farmers are not normal. We are not normal. You can't treat them like you would other business people. So if you come from the business world and you try to work with farmers like you do other business connections, I promise you will fail at doing that. And so I remember a number of years ago, I went to Seattle and I was on a farmer panel for NORI, the carbon credit, one of the first carbon credit programs. And at the end of that event, I told them, I said, you don't understand farmers well enough. Because I think I was the only farmer, the three of us that were on the panel were about the only farmers there. And they were treating, they were going to take their model to the farmers like they were just other business people. And I said, you can't do that. It's a different way to deal with them. They're much more relational. You've just got to approach it differently. I don't think they listened to me, and I don't think they were very successful either. So you have to understand farmers, speak their language, and the way you do that is by going to where they are and learning as much as you can about them.
Well, and I've had the good fortune to work with a lot of our founders here, so I'm going to give them a chance to reply to a question here. In regards to working with the farmers, has that helped your business directly? Just raise your hand quickly if it's actually helped your business. So take a look at that, and we lost a few founders here, but a good chunk of the founders that are here yet do recognize the fact that what we are doing is helping. So a next topic I want to dive into here is data and the privacy of your data and stuff like that. A lot of how we judge the success of trials and that is based on the data. What's your view on the privacy aspect, and how can we do a better job of keeping that integrity of the data as we go through these processes? Let's start with Joe, since he's my data phenom here, so give Keith a little break.
Well, farmers by nature are kind of independent and kind of reserved. We're willing to help our neighbor, but at the end of the day, to a lot of farmers, you ask them, how many acres do you farm? In the rest of the world, that's asking them what their W-2 salary is. So we're by nature individuals that want to remain private. And these companies, if we want them to succeed, we have to be conscious of that in today's information world, if we're not careful with the data we're collecting for them, that can be very detrimental to them and a competitor getting wind and getting a leg up on them. So I guess, to me, I'm passionate about not just the data, but in data integrity. So when I'm putting in trials in my monitor, I am basically coding things. It might have the seed number on it, but then I'm going to use an acronym or abbreviation that I know that I can share with the Ag Ventures and the Ag Launch team. But then if that data, because of cloud and everything else, gets out to one of the other bots and miners, they aren't going to know what HX -1 is, but the team will know. So I feel that that is a critical role we play in protecting ourselves as well.
You're way ahead of us.
The problem is sometimes I don't remember the acronyms.
But that definitely has been an issue with dealing with different input companies through the years where they want you to use their system and they have all the data. It's like something's not right there. So I appreciate the intentionality of trying to get the data back to be owned by the farmer and controlled by the farmer. I think that's a good way to have it.
I'll speak to the founder side of this a little bit because my data essentially is that the notes my wife takes in Excel. So on our farm, it's not very, we run a very low tech operation. But from a founder side, I think you need to give farmers a reason to give you data, right? Like they need a reason, a justification for that data to be passed to you, because that's the only way that trust gets created is by being able to pass that data for a purpose. And so a lot of times we're, trying to create platforms in the future with different forms of data that we have or different performance data that we've got. And we don't necessarily tell the farmers or tell the actual growers how they're going to benefit from giving us this data, how they're going to benefit from us using this data. There needs to be some level of incentive for them to share that data.
And I don't have a lot of experience with this, but I do know that farmers are pretty skeptical that their data won't be protected, and they've been probably taken advantage of enough that they are just going to be a little reluctant to do that. So not only tell them why you need it, but tell them how you're going to protect it as well. And maybe it's using code language like this or something else, but just be upfront with them about how you're either anonymizing things or how that data is being protected, just so they don't assume that they understand what you say. Just if you say that it's going to be encrypted or protected, explain it to them and, be honest and upfront.
Next topic I would like to discuss is success stories and failures of working with startups and the connection between the farmers and the founders and tech in general. Dan, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, sure. I have actually 3 stories to talk about with this one, and so I'm glad we hit on this point because so I think generally speaking, the reason that this model is successful is because you integrate those 3 different roles, right? Between investor, farmer, and founder. The more that you can get a tight integration between those 3, the more success we're going to have in this industry. The reality is that the companies that I've seen successful, I'll talk about the first one is Swarm Farm Robotics out of Australia, a farmer themselves who raised all their initial capital from farmers, local farmers, in order to launch, and now that they're expanding across the world. And I have the pleasure of working with that team, but they understand the fundamental problems because they were the problems that they experienced as farmers. And so bringing that to integrating those 3 roles and making them much tighter, I think that's what this organization's about. That's what we're all doing here. Another one that's similar is Interplant, where they raised most of their primary funders are all farmers as well. And the way that they're working with, they have a farmer panel as well. And so integrating in a different way there. And the third one is companies who are building technology that is actually causing an inflection or a movement in the market. When I say that, an example of that would be the iPhone. You wouldn't have been able to have technologies like Uber and Lyft without the iPhone, without the capability of the iPhone and the GPS technology that's in the iPhone. And a lot of the technologies that we see here today are those foundational technologies that help us go from the evaluation of data to actually the action to with that data and with that information. And so the closer that we can get those two things together, the more success we'll have. And there's lots of companies in the room that I could mention about that, but those are the success stories that I have.
I don't have that much experience with it, but I found it very satisfying to be able to work directly with the founders and give that input. And so seeing that taken to heart and maybe changing some of the ways they're doing things based on the input that we give is just a really nice thing. One thing as a kind of a warning to the founders, one of the pitches we're given one time was basically saying how as farmers we're just poisoning the world. And it's like, yep, nope, I don't want anything to do with that company from now on, period. So make sure you know who you're talking to when you're pitching.
For myself, a success story would be the use of whole organics. I got involved with that as a farm trial, just tried 5 gallons in year 1. And actually got delivered, I think, with Mark's, and I had to come up to Andy's to get it out of his refrigerator that year. And that went to the next year. I saw enough results that I went out and got a tote of it. And I've been getting a tote every year since. Now, stacking. That was something you mentioned in your talk. Now we're stacking that with Rise Bio now to do an analysis of, is that working? Can we ground truth it? And I want to find out this year, can I pull the organics off? And is there still a benefit from the last 2 years' applications? Rise Bio is going to help me figure that out. The other one, you talked about success and failure. Well, there's success with failure. And that is something that I've seen. I did one of the Grip Light trials, and I'm not a power user of that. I don't have multiple employees. It's myself and my 18-year-old son, but we still use the Grip Light, and in doing so, I feel it was a success when we found that it would not work in the middle of my machine shed. That is something they are working on addressing. We had a point where I needed other grip tags, and from a matter of timing and cost, we were able to develop a system where he could just generate them, email them to me. I could print them off on weatherproof labels that I had access to on a laser printer, and we didn't have to go through any shipping costs or specialty things. So there's successes we could find through overcoming challenges or potential failures, depending on how you want to look at them.
Well, being new to this group, I don't have a lot of examples necessarily, within this room. But as I look at Green Cover, I guess our farmer founder was our own farm, and we just launched Green Cover out of that. Which, there's good things and bad things to not having outside investment. We still have complete control. But like I said earlier, I think we lack some perspective that it would have been really nice to have been part of a group like this, to have some external influences, advice, and just have a little bit more input into that. One company that we use quite a bit down in our area, there's a company called AgVA, and I don't think they probably came through this program at all, but it was founded, they're a short line equipment company making planter and drill attachments and parts. But that's been very successful because it was started by a really good farm consultant, and they had lots of farmers who gave input into the company. And I think the success of that company was because they were so closely tied to the farm. And so I think that's a good model for a lot of what I see happening here.
Well, and I'll add to AgVA's story. I mean, we talked earlier about the loss of a founder. They lost their founder, and I would almost say they gained steam once they've rebounded from that. So keep that in mind as as we're building these businesses and stuff like that. There is opportunity. It's just we got to find the right people at the right time.
Yeah, because Matt was a very, very strong personality, anybody that knew him, and he had great vision, but he may have taken it about as far as he was going to take it. Yeah. And then, he died in a rock climbing accident, and I think they've continued to grow because they had some good people in place.
And that's, that's building depth into your company, and that's, I'm glad you brought that one up, Keith. And that leads me right into the next question. That's part of the reason I chose the people we did today on the panel is the global perspective. I think this is probably the most diverse panel I've seen in a while, so I guess want you guys to discuss a little bit of where you see agriculture going on a global perspective and where you see opportunities for improvement. Who wants to go first on that one? Dan looks like he's ready to go.
All right. Well, yeah, I do have the benefit of working with companies all over the world, and so I guess I can speak to what I see in those different markets. I mean, in Australia, you see a particular concern around eroding topsoil just because of the desertification that's visibly taking place there. I think on that continent, there's much more of a sense of needing to maybe not tread so heavily on the soil. And so I think you're seeing a lot of transition taking place there. I mean, if you go to the UK and England, I think it's really just like fighting for the fact that like farming is still something that we want our kids to be able to do. So when you look across Europe right now, I don't want to get political, but you do. Well, it is political, and so you necessarily need to I think we need to be better advocates for the good that farming does, and better advocates for why this is something that needs to continue so that we can continue eating and continue, I hate the feeding the world thing, but feeding ourselves and feeding our local communities with good, well-grown crops. And so I think that's kind of the macro story going on around the world right now.
I think that the problems that farmers face globally are very similar. Like you said, erosion, agronomic problems, a lot of this, social problems, we see, very similar as well. The solutions are going to be somewhat different, but we can learn from each other. So back in February, Joel Williams, he's an agronomist from Canada. He did a workshop in Omaha that we helped with, and he brought in 2 farmers from Australia. And they did a 2-day, pretty intense regenerative agronomy type, really deep dive type workshop, had 70 or 80 people there, mostly from Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, and they were just, my brother and I were there, we just were soaking it in because the solutions that they were using on their farms in Australia to combat many of the same problems, lack of profitability, lack of nutrition, diseases, all these things, and the solutions that they were using, we can't use the exact same things, but man, we could learn a lot from the principles that they were doing, and then we can take that and tweak it and modify it for our own operations. So I think because the problems are very similar, we can look at the solution frameworks very similarly, and then, the farmer has to be the artist in knowing how to take that framework and then, put it into action that will work on their own individual farm. So with the internet, with the ability to communicate, on a Zoom call, anywhere in the world instantaneously now, we are going to see that information and those solutions get shared so much more than they ever have been. And I think that will allow us globally to help each other leverage some of these solutions. I would love our products to be able to go, overseas much easier, but again, it's a bulky product. Seed is there's just so many issues with shipping seed. It's heavy, it's not worth that much, and so you have a large amount invested in the logistics, and then there's all kinds of export regulation. So it's just not practical for us to send our product overseas, but we can send our information and solutions.
I don't get out much, but I do look at the internet, and something that always intrigues me is Australian tramline farming. And, that's intrigued me. That intrigued me years back. That's led to the idea of strip till, where we're not treading where we're planting, and then matching up planter width, strip till bar width, sprayer widths, and trying to reduce that impact in the field. But beyond that, in a little bit more global view, I've always been intrigued by Europe and the regulatory environment that they deal with. And I feel that Europe seems to be 10 to 20 years ahead of us in a lot of those regards. So it's like what you see happening over there is probably going to be coming towards us. And as we shrink as a farming population, that becomes even more real. And we're seeing that. So I guess, Ohio River Valley with the nutrient management regulations and stuff. So how does that place us? How does that place me in northern Iowa? And that also drives me, you can look at those things as burdens, or they could be an opportunity. And the opportunity would be is if those regulations are going to come down, those society demands are going to be there, am I prepared with my farming operation to thrive in that? And that means figuring out things like the strip till, the cover crops in advance so that I'm not being forced to, but I've actually been doing it and I can just roll right into that. So that's kind of the forward look that I think looking outside of our backyard gives, and I'm trying to be more conscious of.
Can I add one thing to that? I love your point. And I think that to the founders in the room, how can you help the farmers that are working with you, that are engaged with you, who are probably the 6% of odd farmers, right? Like just cutting edge farmers who are interested in innovation. How can you help them prepare for the future that we all see coming or might see potentially coming down the line and down the pike? How can you help them prepare for that? That's how you will ultimately add value and help prepare for those regulations, prepare for the things that are likely coming towards us.
Helle.
Sorry.
So I do have the background from Europe, grew up on a farm in Denmark, and that was one of the reasons why we immigrated to the United States back in 1984, was because of the heavy regulatory system that was in place, and that's just expanded from there. So whenever we complain as farmers in Oregon about what's happening, it's like, oh, they have it 10 times worse than other places. We can still complain, but it's nothing like other places. So that's going to continue, and it will get more and more so in the U.S., whether we want it to or not, it will. But as said, that also does bring opportunities. And I think the younger generation, boy, they get spoken of pretty harshly sometimes, but at the same time, they are idealistic. They have values, and they are out to change the world. I also sit on a board at Oregon State University where we give out scholarships and internship grants and things like that. And whenever those young people come in, I'd leave that room just enthralled afterwards that we are in good hands. And so this feeds into that. All these innovative products, things that we can do better. It'll be fine. Yes, we have to change. We cannot keep doing things the way we have been doing it. That is going away, and we just have to deal with that. But there will be opportunities ahead, and we will find new ways of doing things, and it'll all. I am cool with the future. We'll figure things out.
I'm going to finish off here with one more question, but I want to make sure, does anybody in the audience have a question yet? Or I don't see any. But I want to make sure you guys know what we all do behind the scenes, and there's a few members here that join our monthly Zoom calls and that. And if you're not on the call list and you want to be on the call list, let me know. We'll try to get you more involved. We have some good, deep conversations there a lot of times, and I like bringing in the founders, and we're trying to bring in more agronomy stuff like that. If you have suggestions what we need to be adding to that part, let me know. We always try to adjust and overcome here pretty quickly, but one last question I have for the panel here is, what do you foresee as your biggest challenge to add new technology on your farm? I stumped him.
I should have paid more attention in agronomy classes. Because at the end of the day, one of my sayings I love is, equipment's fun. I love equipment. I'll wrench, bang, weld, paint, mess up. That equipment's fun. If I figured out agronomy, I can grow more yield in corn or other crops. And Lord help me if I ever figure out how to market it, I'd actually be profitable.
I think for us, part of it's going to be trying to decide between better and best. There's going to be a lot of good options out there, a lot of opportunities. You can't afford them all, so you're going to have to decide, which ones are you going to, make a move on, which ones are you going to implement. And then trying to decide which ones are really going to add to your profitability and which ones are just shiny things, fun toys that will, be fun to play with, but will they really make a difference? And so just that evaluation process, and I would put that out as a challenge, to the founders here too. Help your customers work through that decision making to convince them that it's not just a shiny thing, it's not just a thing of convenience, but it will actually make a difference and it will actually add to your bottom line and profitability.
Yeah, that's really our, when we look at something new, will it make us money? Will it save us time? That's equivalent to money basically on our farm where we don't have the labor. And there's a certain amount of just, is it the better thing to do? So that plays into it too. So if it fits those categories and it works for our system, we are willing to do it if we can make it work. But there has to be a reason for it to do it.
Yeah, for us, it's access to markets. It sounds funny as the marketing guy on the panel to be talking about the fact that we have to market our farm and access like more of those local the local opportunities and local marketing opportunities that exist and that are starting to come to. But it's very weird in a lot of cases for people to come on farm and buy dairy, for example. It's kind of frowned upon, and there's lots of rules and regulations around it and things like that. And so just getting access to more of the people who are interested in things like that, I think that's the biggest thing that we're looking for from a growth perspective.
Well, I think that's a wrap. We're out of time here.